It's finally happening. Canon will announce the EOS R1 and the R5 Mark II at 6 AM Eastern Time, along with a few accessories. And with less than a day before the big announcement, we've already received a spec sheet from Canon China showing a handful of specifications for the Canon EOS R1. The image was quickly pulled down, but thanks to mirrorless rumors, we've got you covered. But before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. The Canon EOS R1, if you had any doubts left that it would have maybe a 30, a 45, or some other megapixel sensor, well, that's not correct. According to Canon China with their leaked spec sheet, the EOS R1 will indeed have a 24 megapixel stacked full frame sensor. And as Canon teased us with that press release a few months back, it's going to have a Digic X image processor. That's right, a Digic X image processor, the same one that came out in the in the 1DX Mark III that has been in many other cameras such as the R6, the R6 Mark II, the R5, the R3, and pretty well every camera with the exception of the R100. Now, does this mean that it's going to be an exact copy of that? No, they've probably done some optimizations and other improvements to make this slightly better in certain areas, although the spec sheet doesn't give us the details. Now, one of the other things the spec sheet mentions, which validates what we saw in the press release, is we get that Digic accelerator chip. Hard to say exactly what that brings, but it sounds like it could be an AI processing chip or some other accelerator that's designed to improve overall throughput and functionality of the camera. In terms of the ISO range, well, it's capable of doing 100 to 102,000, and that's not the extended range. We'd expect the extended range to double that. The Canon EOS R3 is capable of 12 frames per second mechanical and 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter. And the R1, well, it matches the 12 frames per second mechanical, but in terms of electronic, it's going to be able to push all the way up to 40 frames per second, so a definite improvement over the R3 and a huge improvement over the 1DX Mark III. Now, in terms of how many shots we can get off, it mentions something about 700 shots, but didn't provide us a lot of details behind what kind of, well, resolution. Was it shooting JPEG, HEIF, RAW? Was it shooting at 12 frames per second or 40 frames per second, 30, or any other sort of setting that you can provide? So it's really hard to know what that 700 means. And in terms of IBIS, yes, it does have internal image stabilization, but now it's time to turn our attention to the video specifications of the Canon EOS R1. As all the rumors had indicated, this camera is capable of shooting up to 6K 60 frames per second. So all the basic frame rates of 24, 25, 30 frames per second, as well as 50 and 60 frames per second. And in 4K, it's capable of shooting all the way up to 120 frames per second. And that's most likely 6K oversampled, and it's both UHD and DCI. But in 1080, 1920 by 1080 or full HD, the Canon EOS R1 is capable of shooting up to 240 frames per second. That's pretty bold, that's pretty fast. Now, in terms of what codecs are offered, nothing is mentioned, and that's, I would like to know, does it do Apple ProRes? Can it do some of the R5C type codecs, the lossless RAW codecs? And again, we don't really have any other information in terms of what it's capable in terms of those video specifications. This just came out, so let me just see if I left anything out about the video specifications. Oh yes, this is something I wanted to bring up because I have the Canon EOS R5 and I never shoot 8-bit because I just find that the dynamic range is terrible and I shoot Canon Log 3 all the time. But the Canon EOS R3 shoots much better 8-bit than the R5. And what I would suspect is the Canon EOS R1 is going to be much more capable at shooting 8-bit, delivering results. So if you're a professional photographer, you're a wildlife photographer, you're shooting landscapes, and whether you're shooting up close at 24 megapixels or shooting 45 megapixels with a Canon EOS R5, the one thing you want to be able to do is you want to get those shots really quickly, and when you want video, you want to switch over, get the video, and you don't want, you're probably getting back to the studio with something like tens of thousands of shots after you've shot a show, and the last thing you want to do after sifting through all those photos is having to grade and white balance your video, and that's one of the benefits of a higher quality 8-bit that's going to offer on the Canon EOS R1, and that's something you're not going to see in the specifications. But the one thing this camera is going to need for photographers out there, videographers, but more specifically photographers, is the bandwidth. And thanks to dual CF Express Type B card slots, the Canon EOS R1 isn't going to have any problems capturing the information at 40 frames per second or doing 6K video up to 60 frames per second RAW. Now, in terms of the size and dimensions, the 1DX Mark III is pretty portly. The R3 is a little bit smaller. The Canon EOS R1 comes in at 157.6 by 49.5 by 87.3 millimeters. So it's good to finally have validation of the Canon EOS R1 coming directly from Canon themselves. So if 24 megapixels doesn't tune you off, this gives you a good bit of information as to the journey that Canon's planning on taking. But there's still something that's missing here. We don't know much about CF Express Type B, the dual card slots. Is it going to be Gen 3 or Gen 4? It shouldn't make too much of a difference, but if you're coming back to the office with 10, 20, 30,000 images, then having Gen 4 will allow you to get it off the camera a whole lot quicker using that CF Express Type B Gen 4. So that would definitely be a plus, and we've heard some telling us that that is the case. But in terms of codecs, in terms of low light performance, in terms of the noise floor, we haven't really gotten an awful lot of information. But there was one leak a little while back that provided this channel with some information stating that the sensor was capable of a 2 millisecond readout time, and that the noise ratio on this camera is going to be much better than anything else that Canon's put on the market. It's considerably better than what we see with the Canon EOS R3. And if you are interested in pre-ordering the Canon EOS R1, I already have the pre-order links in the description down below. But what you're going to notice right now, it just says notify me, and the reason for that is Canon hasn't lifted the embargo yet, and they won't do that until the announcement tomorrow. So until that point, all you're going to see is notify me. So what I'd suggest is go ahead and bookmark, copy down this link that I have in the description down below, these guys right here, put them in your browser, and what we're going to be doing is tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock in the morning, is we're going to be covering the announcement live. Now, Canon isn't going to start their announcement until 6 o'clock, so for the first hour, I'm going to have my expert panel where we're going to talk about the latest and greatest leaked specifications, images, photos for the Canon EOS R1, who we think it's for, and I'm also going to have a couple of guests that actually use the Canon EOS R3, the 1DX Mark III, that shoot wildlife, that shoot equestrian, that shoot various types of photography that this camera is marketed towards, and they'll tell you their take on 24 megapixels versus 45 megapixels. All that starting live tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock Eastern time. However, you should be aware that there's some really significant deals on right now. The Canon 1DX Mark III, if you click on this link at B&H, they'll email you offering the camera at $49.99. And the R3, well, using that same click here, they'll email you an offer for $39.99. And I hope to provide you with up-to-date, the latest leaked specifications on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. But what we're seeing with this information from Mirrorless Rumors is that everything that we got in the last couple of months is proving to be bang on. And I get a sense that the Canon EOS R5 Mark II is going to follow that same path. I do expect it's going to be 45 megapixels, full-frame stacked sensor, a completely new design. But will it get that new Digic accelerator chip? Well, it's really hard to say, but knowing that the EOS R1 is going to get the Digic X image processor, well, the R5 is also going to get a Digic X image processor, not a new image processor, unless, of course, we include optimizations to the old one being the new one with the same name being a new chip. It's a little, until we actually know the specifics, it's really kind of hard to say, but I'm pretty excited. I'm going to wrap this up right now because I want to get this out to you, edit it, publish it before the afternoon really kicks off. But pretty exciting information. Thank you, Mirrorless Rumors, for letting us know this information. And thank you to you at home for watching to the very end. And for those of you that do use my pre-order links, a big thank you to you, because it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to fill out any extra forms or put in any coupon codes. It takes you directly to Adorama or B&H. And I get anywhere from 3 to 8% back. And that really does help keep this channel going, keep this channel growing. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest and greatest, go ahead and subscribe, choose all notifications, because I can guarantee you this is not going to be the only video today. And then we have our live stream starting tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. You can also follow me on X. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great day. Cheers.